Do you ever remember a time in your life when you were lost? I remember one when I must have been about 5. We had gone down to Virginia Beach, which was something we did quite often. My dad would never take a week off, but he might take a long weekend. And so we would go down to Virginia Beach. And we were staying at this hotel. We went out onto the beach to spend most of the day. And I was playing there by the edge of the water. I love to dig in the sand. But I had sort of wandered into the water a little bit, and I guess it sort of washed me down the beach. And the next thing I know is I came up looking for Mom and Dad, and I couldn't find them. And for the longest time, I didn't know I was lost. But when I realized, hey, I can't find Mom and Dad, the tears just started. I was screaming, crying. And this nice lady came up to me and said, "Are you lost?" And I was like, "No, my parents are." I knew where I was. They didn't know where they were. So she helped me. She led me to a lifeguard stand. My parents had already gone to get help. They saw a police officer on the boardwalk and got him, and so they had people looking for us. The lifeguard got on the radio, found out my parents were just up about 2 blocks up, and got reunited. And when I saw them, I was so thankful. And I never wandered off from them, at least on that trip, anymore. There's something comforting about finding those we love when we're lost. The comfort I had when I saw my mom and dad gave me great relief. I had running through my head, I was going to be by myself the rest of my life, wandering the streets. I was terrified. I know of another time in my life when I was lost as an adult, when I was very distraught, when I was at the end of my rope. When I graduated from Chowan College, now Chowan University, I got married to a young lady that I had met at Chowan, and we were married for 2.5 years, what I thought was happily married. And I remember coming home from work one day, and I'll never forget, she was sitting there eating cantaloupe. I can see it just like plain as day. I'd been down to Myrtle Beach as part of my sales territory and had come back home, and she said, "I'm leaving." I thought she meant she was going up to Kmart. And then she went back to the bedroom and brought out suitcases. And I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? We had just been on a great vacation. We had the time of our lives. She had written a nice letter to my mom for Mother's Day, or note in the card. And she decided she didn't want to be married anymore, which was devastating to me. First of all, I didn't believe in divorce. I thought it was wrong. I'd committed for a lifetime. But that didn't work out. I had actually talked to her about going back to school and going to the ministry, and she said, "No, we're both in good jobs, making good money. We're not going to do that." So I just pushed it aside and thought, okay then. After she left, thinking I would be divorced, I thought, well, now I can't go in the ministry, because how can I be a minister and be divorced? And we had gone to church a little bit, but we weren't going regular. And there happened to be a disciple church there in Wilmington, North Carolina. So I started attending there. And I remember going and talking to the minister and told him my desire to go into the ministry, but now that I was getting divorced, I couldn't. And he said, "What?" And he pulled out the church directory and went through all the families. And almost every family had had a divorce. Their children had gotten a divorce. Divorce was all through the church. And he said, "You can minister to these people in a way I can't. I don't know what it's like." And so he said, "Don't let that stop you." He said, "Jesus never called a perfect person to the ministry to follow him." So I decided I would go on to school, but there for a long time I struggled. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was right, what was wrong. And I finally turned to God and found relief and comfort and peace. And it was a struggle. But once I got my relationship back with God, everything came together. Now, Jesus has a certain group has gathered to him. And the scribes and the Pharisees tell us they were tax collectors and sinners. They were drawing near to him, and he was welcoming them in. Not only that, he was eating with them. What was Jesus thinking? How could he do this? How could he allow himself to be defiled by these people who are lost? See, the religious leaders had already written them off. They didn't matter anymore. And yet here Jesus is, who's teaching and doing great miracles and has all this authority, but yet he's dealing with these losers, these people who we have written off. And so they were getting angry. They were disgusted by what Jesus was doing. He was breaking bread with people who the religious leaders looked down upon. Now it says they were tax collectors and sinners. Now we don't know what the sinners were, but probably prostitutes and other what Jewish leaders would have called lowlifes. And Jesus is right there amongst them. And in their eyes, he is defiling himself by being with them and breaking bread. The amazing thing about this whole passage is that the religious leaders are looking down on Jesus because he is with these people they have written off. But those who have been written off are open to Jesus' word, to his authority, to follow his way. And the religious leaders were not. Their eyes and ears were closed. It was like going, la, 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 la. They're not going to hear. They didn't want what Jesus was selling. They didn't want a heaven that was open to all people. They wanted it to be exclusive. It had to be, it's got to be people like us. We can't have outsiders. We can't have these people who are tax collectors ripping us off and sinners. Why would he do it? Jesus tries to teach the religious leaders a lesson through parables. The first parable is about a lost sheep. A shepherd has 100 sheep. And when he starts to count, he realizes one is missing. He still has 99, but one's missing. He leaves the 99 in the open country, where they would be susceptible to prey or predators. But there's safety in numbers. But that one sheep who is lost is in great danger. Predators will seek out the one who is by itself. So the shepherd leaves the 99 and goes after the one. And when he finds the one, he rejoices greatly, because there's a great chance that that one would be killed. But he has saved it. He is bringing it home back to the fold. And he's so excited about what has taken place. He says to his friends and neighbors, "Come and celebrate with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." Now think about that. It's just one sheep. Why all this celebration? Because the shepherd finds value in each one. Not in as the group, but each individual sheep has great value to him. And if he's a good shepherd, he will care for all the sheep, not just 99, but all 100. See, Jesus is saying here that one lost sheep are those who the religious leaders have cast out. They're the sinners, the tax collectors. The 99 righteous are the Pharisees, the religious leaders, who believe that they're completely righteous. They're not in need of being rescued. Little do they know they truly are. But in their mind, they are walking in God's light. So the 99 are the Pharisees and the scribes, the religious leaders. That one is the lost, the outcast, the ones who have been shunned, the ones who have been labeled losers. Jesus is trying to get the religious leaders to open their eyes to understand. And perhaps he thought that wasn't enough, and he brings up the woman who lost a coin. She had 10. And it says a silver coin. Now, this coin is believed to be a drachma, which is a Greek coin. It is equal to about a day's wage. So think about it. That's 10 days' wages she had. But she lost one, so now she only has 9 days of wage. But she goes to look. It says she lights the lamp. And you never lit the lamp unless you definitely needed it, because the oil was not cheap. She lights the lamp, she sweeps the floor, she scours the house until she finds that one coin. And she celebrates. She calls her friends and neighbors and says, "Celebrate with me, for I have found my lost coin." This is trying to tell the Pharisees, the religious leaders, that the angels in heaven rejoice when one lost is found. This is the same message as the first parable. It emphasizes the thoroughness of the search. The shepherd scoured the land to find a sheep, going into the gullies and everywhere he could to find a sheep. This woman has scoured her home, cleaning it up, sweeping and looking, lighting the lamp so she can see into the darkest of corners. The point would have been clear to Jesus' listeners. The sinners with whom he is associating were extremely valuable to God. To the religious leaders, no, they weren't valuable. They were people who had chosen their way of life, chosen what they're doing, and they are written off. But Jesus is saying, no, each person has great value to God. Why is that? Because we are all made in God's image. This is telling us that no one is lost completely. There is always the chance they can come home to God. While I was in Corpus Christi, there was a news story about a church in San Antonio, Texas. And in this article, and actually one of the TV stations did a thing on it because it became big news. One of the local churches in San Antonio decided that they would start having Bible study in bars. And not just your nice little sports bars, but some of the rougher bars. And they would go in and they would start having Bible studies while all these people were doing what they do normally in bars. But there was one bar that sort of opened everybody's eyes. Because, see, when the story first broke, there were those who were condemning the church, saying, why are they doing that? Why are they taking the Bible into this sinful place? Those in the Christian community were putting them down. But when the bar patrons were asked about, what do you think about this church coming in? All the ones they asked that were in the bar said, I think it's a great idea. The bar patrons, not the people with the Bible study, actually asked the bartender, who was the manager, to turn down the music while they had Bible study. The bar patrons asked them to do that. So they would turn down the music so people could hear the Bible study. And people would gather around the table, and there would be about 10 or 12 from the church and about 15 others standing around. Some would pull up seats, some would just stand and listen. For some, it was the first time they had ever heard the Bible. And they kept coming to this one bar every week. And it became a big thing where many people were coming to the bar just to hear the Bible study. They even had a little slogan, Bible and beer. Now, at our church in Washington, we used to have a spaghetti dinner, and we were told, boy, if y'all would serve wine with this spaghetti, y'all would really make money. Spaghetti and wine. But this Bible study and beer was a big hit. Now, there was another church that when this happened, decided they would do something different, and they started holding a Bible study in the tattoo parlor. Another good spot. The minister said that the church that was meeting in the bar opened their eyes, and so they decided, where can we meet? And they happened to be in an area where there were several tattoo parlors, and one had a great big old storefront and had a big area that was unused. They set up some tables and chairs, and they did Bible study. Now, that one wasn't as successful as the one that was in the bar. And there were others that started in other bars that didn't last, but the one that broke the story became very successful for a time. Then the person who was heading the Bible study up had some health issues and had to quit. And unfortunately, no one was willing to pick it up. Some people were just too uncomfortable going into that setting. But isn't Jesus saying that's where we should be? Shouldn't we be reaching to the people that maybe are a little different? Maybe they're like the sinners and tax collectors of old. But the church is not very good at that. We're much more comfortable being with the people who are like us. We're much more comfortable being in a situation in which our comfort is not disturbed. I believe that this passage calls for us to see value in everyone. The lost have the same value as those who follow faithfully. And I will say, here at the church, when we have so many people coming to seek assistance, that sometimes I can get, how should I put it? Put it this way, I don't have a lot of compassion. I don't have a lot of compassion because I see the same people, and you get frustrated because it's like they're not trying to improve. They're happy at the status they're in. I would love to help someone and see them grow in Christ instead of always just coming asking for assistance. At times I will have prayer with those who come in. And sometimes I feel like it falls on deaf ears. Others, it may do some good. But we need to treat everyone as a child of God. For Jesus is pointing to us today saying everyone has great value. And everyone can be saved if they'll open their hearts and their minds to God. We can't force them to open it, but we can plant a seed. And so we are called to be like Jesus. See, the religious leader said, he's dealing with the wrong crowd. He's hanging out with the wrong crowd. How many of you ever heard that? They're hanging out with the wrong crowd. We'll close with a story from my high school years. I had a good friend, actually my best friend in high school, John Sweeney. John Sweeney was a big guy, and we hung out all the time. I think one of the things that John and I liked about each other is neither one of us were real big partiers, but we loved to chew tobacco. Now, in that day, they had a smoking section in our school out back behind the cafeteria. So during lunch, everybody would go out and take a smoke or take a chew or a dip. John Sweeney and I used to hang out in the school all the time. We got in trouble together all the time. Mr. Cofield, our assistant principal, said, "Oh my gosh, it's you two again," every time we walked in. We even had a class together. We got thrown out of the class together for the rest of the semester. And that's a shame because that was typing. And I thought, I'm never going to be a typist. What are you talking about? It has been the best thing because I can type now on my computer. I know the keys. I don't have to look at them. I should send that teacher a basket of fruit and say thank you. Even though you only let me stay in your class 2 weeks, it helped. Actually, I think it was about 4 weeks we stayed. And then we were in the principal's office the rest of the year during that class time. My counselor was also John Sweeney's counselor because her last name almost the same, S.W. and S.M. Mrs. Oliver, lovely lady. We were sent to Mrs. Oliver's office together. And she said, "John, Steve, you are great guys, but together you're hell." She said, "In school from now on, I don't want you two to hang out. I don't want you to even walk down the hall together. At lunch, you're not allowed to sit together. After school, you can go and do what you want. But in school, you are not to be together." We looked at each other and laughed, but she was serious. And you know what? For our senior year, we didn't hang out in school. Our grades went way up. We didn't get thrown out of a single class. And my choir teacher or director, I had tried out for a touch of glass, because EC Glass, which was a special group you had to try out for. And I didn't get in. And Mr. Carroll, the choir director, told me at the end of my senior year, he said, "Steve, if I'd known you're going to straighten up this much." Now think about that. With us being together, we were trouble. But when we were separated, we were fine. We need to be put in a place in which we can be fine, we can be good, in which we can open our eyes and see the opportunities that God puts before us. Because there are many. Too often we don't see them. We don't recognize them. We don't take advantage of the opportunities God puts before us. When I was hanging with John Sweeney, I was hanging with the wrong crowd during school hours. After school, we were fine. Maybe as Christians, there should be no wrong crowd to hang with. Because we should welcome everybody. We should invite everybody to come. We have the greatest story. We have the greatest hope. We have the greatest God. And yet we're not sharing it. We're keeping it to ourselves. Let us go out into the world and invite people to God every day, because it is life-changing. Let us be God's people. Amen.